Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of CX Myth Busting with me, Darren Wake, and our special guest, Ian Golding. So, just to briefly introduce myself, I'm head of customer experience at CustomerSure, and Ian would like to introduce
So,
himself.
Ian Golding, Global Customer Experience Specialist and CustomerSure Myth Buster.
Thank you very much, Ian. Putting the myths to the sword. Um, if you've seen other episodes of these Mythbusters, you'll know the format that we put a kind of a myth, or is it a myth, isn't it a myth, to Ian that's totally unknown to Ian, so he doesn't know what we're going to ask him, and we just kind of talk about it and decide whether or not it is indeed a myth or something that you perhaps should be looking at. Um, this one, Ian, has come in. Putting my CX manager hat on here. I did a customer journey map 12 months ago, and I don't need to revisit. I don't need to revisit it for another 12 months because it's still relevant. So I'm just going to leave it
Oh,
as is.
that's a good one. I like that one.
There's a lot of missing context in these questions, but
So there's a
there
lot
we
of missing context, but I can respond to it,
go.
and that there's no point beating about the bush, but that is absolutely 100% myth. And the reason it's a myth is that many organizations around the world have, in reality, only ever mapped their customer journeys once.
Hmm.
Now, the positive to your theoretical scenario, Darren, is at least they had the intention of remapping it. Which actually
Yes,
is more than most.
yes.
Most are only mapping the journey once and never looking at it ever again. Now, I would say categorically that if you're going to do something once and never look at it ever again, don't bother doing it at all,
Hmm.
quite frankly. But the reason why this is a myth is that, firstly, there is a huge lack of understanding still to this day as to why the customer journey is important and what you're supposed to do with it. And this is what leads to people doing it once and not
Hmm.
visiting it. The customer journey, if I speak to everyone as though they're 5 years old, it is a visual representation of everything the customer directly interacts with, everything they see, feel, hear, and touch. Now, the reason we need to know what that looks like is because we need to know today, with that journey, what in the journey works and what in the journey doesn't work. Where is it in the massive interactions you're having with your customers? You're having the greatest negative impact on customer perception and, as a result, financial performance. And that's why we need to know what the journey looks like. But the reason why the scenario you gave me is a myth is because the journey right now, if you visualize it, in 12 months' time, is extremely likely to have changed because the interactions that customers have change as technology changes, as the environment changes, as the economy changes, how they interact, what they interact with, how they feel about the interaction is constantly changing. And if you are only mapping the journey once every 2 years, the likelihood is that within that 2 years, multiple things in the journey will have changed. But if you are still measuring the journey that you created 2 years earlier, your conclusion as to what to fix in the journey will be based on what the journey looked like 2 years ago. And as a result, you will jump to entirely the wrong conclusion.
Yeah.
Best practice is that journeys need to become living, breathing, dynamic organisms. As something in the journey changes, you have to reflect that change.
Yeah.
And the most important thing of all is you then have to change the way you're measuring the journey. You've heard me say hundreds of times, Darren, that most organizations are measuring the customer experience badly. But if we think of how many organizations design their VoC mechanism without even knowing what the journey looked like, and they are still using
Yes.
the same mechanism that they put in place years ago.
Yeah.
But the journey is constantly changed, and
Yeah.
they wonder why their VoC is not really giving them any financial
Yeah.
return
Yeah.
because it's not reflective of the truth. So if you are not maintaining your journey dynamically, you need to be. And every time something in the journey changes, you have got to revisit the way you're measuring the journey to ensure it is still an accurate representation of the truth. That is best practice. But I can say categorically that the majority are not doing that,
Mhm.
unfortunately.
Yeah, no, I concur with that, Ian. I think many organisations go into journey mapping with the best intentions, and they might have a really fruitful experience, a really good day, but then it can quickly gather dust. It can quickly go into a bottom drawer that's never revisited, and then, like you rightly say, that they're measuring things on a past tense. But customers live in the future, live in the present, and things are changing in the customers' lives all around them. Technology changes, disruptors to the marketplace, expectations on everything from deliveries to technology to customer service. And if you're basing it on a previous experience, then it's
Absolutely.
just that there becomes such a disconnect between the scores and what you think the customer values and what the
That's
customer
right.
really
It,
does.
it essentially becomes meaningless. And
Yes. Yeah.
you've heard me tell a story of
Yeah.
my own where I made this mistake. I mapped a journey many years ago. I don't not giving away my age, where most of the interactions when the journey was first mapped were over the telephone. But 2 years later,
Yeah.
those interactions had literally switched from telephone to online, which does give an indication of my age. But the mistake was the journey that we were measuring 2 years later was the journey we mapped
Yeah.
in the first place. So we were concluding that everything was okay because everyone was happy with the way we were answering the phone,
Yeah.
but no one was answering the phone anymore. So yeah, you have got to make this dynamic, but this is challenging. That this is why customer experience is, as I describe it, a science, because you need to understand the science of customer journey management. And
Yeah.
I think that's the best way to conclude this myth is journeys are not about mapping. Journeys are about management,
Yeah.
continually managing the ability of the journey to become ever better able at meeting the needs and expectations of customers. You can't do that looking at it every 2 years.
No, no, well said, Ian. I like that phrase, a living, breathing document as well. It's not something that's just a single piece of work. So
Absolutely.
great. Very good. Thank you very much, Ian, and thank you for the person who came up with that myth to talk about. So, thank you very much, Ian. Do get in touch with any thoughts, suggestions, comments, or myths that you'd like us to talk about in a future episode. And leaves me to say thank you, Ian, and see you next time.
Always a pleasure.
Thanks, Ian. Cheers.